Hey everybody, welcome to Eden Alternative Live this afternoon. Our topic, the impact of social inequity on workforce well-being, an aging services leadership perspective. And we have an awesome guest panel today. So looking forward to telling you more about them. So I'm just going to dive right in with that. I first want to welcome Deke Cato. He is the Chief Executive Officer at AG Roads Health and Rehab. It's a nonprofit organization that operates 3 nursing homes in the metro Atlanta area. In addition to being a licensed nursing home administrator, Deke is certified by the National Council of Certified Dementia Practitioners as a certified dementia practitioner and a certified Alzheimer's dementia practitioner care and dementia trainer. He is also a certified Eden educator and a member of the Eden Alternative Board of Directors. Thank you, Deke. And a certified virtual dementia tour facilitator for nursing homes. Deke also serves on the board of directors for several organizations, including Leading Age Georgia, the Eden Alternative, Georgia Healthcare Association, and I'm Still Here Foundation. We also have with us David Sproul, who is a founding partner and managing director of WD International Consulting. He is a regional coordinator for Eden Alternative Spain and a leadership coach certified through ICF. And for over 21 years now, he has worked with seniors and is an international leader in the culture change movement with proven experience in transforming organizations to become person-centered. Now, through various roles, David has gained extensive knowledge and experience with senior service providers in a variety of settings. As a seasoned trainer, he has a proven ability to connect with people from diverse backgrounds and cultures. And so welcome, Deke and David. So glad to have you guys today.
Yeah, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Happy to be here.
Yes.
You know, Deke, when we were getting ready for this show, we were talking about the topics we would cover, et cetera. And one of the things that you said to me was, Laura, we have to take a moment at the beginning of the show to make sure that people have a perspective on what we'll be talking about. And you pointed out, you said, look, we're 2 Black men, and we want people to know that our focus today isn't just racial inequity, but also inequity of many kinds, whether we're talking about ageism, ableism, racism, sexism, et cetera. The list goes on. And not to mention, right, the intersectionality between them.
Yeah.
And so we'll have an opportunity to get into that more later. So I have some questions for you. If it's all right with you guys, I'm just going to jump right in with those.
Sure.
And, the focus today of the show in part is to draw some connections between the Eden Alternative domains of well-being and the impact of social inequity on the aging services workforce. So my question is, the Eden Alternative domains of well-being for the people out there who aren't acquainted with them are identity, connectedness, security, autonomy, meaning, growth, and joy. And so with those 7 domains in mind, what examples or stories do you have of what happens when social inequities get swept under the rug in the workplace? And how does your example impact one or more of these domains? Which one of you want to take that on?
Would you want?
Yeah, I'll happy to jump in. The first thing I'll say, we are talking about social inequities with regards to our workforce. So I think, we start with the basic framework that our employees, our workforce, our labor force are so critical to us and our operation. I think our industry has for so long taught us the mantra of the resident is always right. And while we definitely understand this from a customer service mantra, I think it has inadvertently led us to neglect in many ways what I believe is among our most important resources, and that's our staff. And I think the social inequities around that, I think the best example I give is what we are undergoing now. And this does pertain to race in some aspect, but I think the COVID has really unearthed a lot of these social inequities. It's unearthed probably the biggest and most obvious inequity that our direct caregivers, our CNAs, our LPNs, our custodial staff are critically underpaid for one, and really under-respected in what they do. And I think this has led to what we have today, which is a recognition. You know, we call them essential now, but they've always been essential. So I think that basic inequity has led to, and we've swept it under the rug for years. We've known this. This is not, none of us who've worked in this industry for any time would not recognize that these individuals are the hardest workers among us, and with our communities could not exist without them. But by sweeping it under the rug, we've accentuated this situation where they've been underpaid for years and years and decades and decades. And now we have problems, right? Because COVID's unearthed that. Now we have problems finding staff that are even willing to work in our industry because of that. So that would be my example. I know it's contemporary because it's caused by COVID, but I think it's a reality. And even within that, it's unearthed other inequities within our staff, right? We've recognized now that most of our caregivers are actually minority groups as well, and most of our leadership are white, males and females. And I think we've within those groups we've seen other inequities that have just arose to the top.
Yeah, great example.
Thank you.
I'd say from my perspective, again, you know, as a leadership coach, I get the opportunity to talk to a lot of staff throughout the whole continuum of aging. And most recently, it's a great question, because most recently I was talking and coaching with a young lady from Ghana. And she was talking about how difficult it was for her, having been in this country for 18 years. She said that when people hear her speak, because she speaks with a different accent, they know she's from a different country, they make assumptions about her based on her appearance, based on her accent. Mm-hmm. And even though she has been successful most of her life, prior to coming to America and after coming to America, she still found that people judged her negatively. And even when she was successful, she would meet new people who she would have to, again, prove herself all over again. Even though she would spend that time working harder than anybody else around her, when a new person would come in, a new staff person, new manager, new supervisor, she'd have to start all over again. And for her, it really impacted her sense of identity, because you talk about, you know, how does it impact the domains? Her identity was one that's very difficult as an African woman who's proud to be an African woman, but knowing that she's being treated differently because of that and having to work harder than anybody else. You know, security, she had that sense of insecurity because she didn't know what she's going to face when she meets new people, when she goes to a new job. Autonomy, meaning, certainly joy. Her joy has been impacted over and over and over again. But, you know, her story is not unusual. I've heard this from other staff members, particularly from different countries, who say the very same thing, that they face that every day. And it doesn't always get addressed in the workplace.
Yep.
Wow. And, you know, David, I'm curious too, you know, I know that you spend some time in different countries coaching. Mm-hmm. And based on what we've just been discussing, are you seeing essentially the same kind of stories unfold regardless of the environment? Is there a different way that those stories unfold in different places that might be relevant to the conversation?
Surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, it's the same everywhere. You know, one of the things about going to different countries and living in different places is that you find out how much more we have in common than we have differences. And even speaking to what Deke was saying about the inequities about the direct care staff, that's the same issue in Spain as well. We're seeing it the same way because they have Latin Americans and others, Africans, different cultures that are coming in who do that work. Those are the people who do the work, people from Eastern Europe. Mm-hmm. And so they're dealing with the same thing, low pay, no respect, is exactly what you described, Deke. Yeah. So to answer your question in the short way, there is no difference. People are people. That's what you learn. It's the same thing. The same issues that we deal with in the United States around aging in the field, other countries are dealing with the very same thing.
Behavior.
Yeah. Because we're all human.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. So yeah, in a previous live show that happened several months back, actually during the peak of the pandemic, or at least the first peak. Let's hope there's not a second one anytime soon here in the States. There was a conversation about really how important it is to understand the difference between diversity, inclusion, and equity in the workplace, right? That, with diversity, yes, great. You have different people represented on the staff, inclusion being the opportunity, well, basically access to opportunity that other people have, and not being just stuck in an hourly position forever unless you want an opportunity that's different than that, right? And equity being, where the rubber hits the road, where you really look into in an intentional way how to start righting the wrongs of discrimination and creating trust in teams, and making sure that teams can be empowered because they're on an even playing field. I'm wondering, how have you bumped up against conversations about making these distinctions in your own experience?
I mean, it's a huge distinction. I actually think it's a distinction that's even more glaring now, even more at risk. I think, especially after the events of last summer and the obvious, racial disturbance, the Black Lives Matter movement, a lot of work around sexual orientation and stuff like that. I think it's gotten even worse, because I think what we have a lot of employers doing now is promoting diversity big time, by events, by speeches, by sometimes even promoting people to positions, but they have not promoted inclusion, and that's a big difference. Was talking to a friend of mine. He's a consultant like David is, Dwayne Andrews, and he's coined the term diversity, DINO, diversity in name only, and we're seeing a whole lot of that now. So I think the push should be obviously to inclusion and equity. Equity, obviously, a lot further down the totem pole. I think when we talk equity, we're talking about the culture of the organization changing to understand, the reality and the need for inclusion. Us as an organization, AG Roads, we have made some deliberate steps towards that, and I think deliberate is the key word when we talk about inclusion and equity, and turning that switch towards that. And I think for me personally, a lot of our efforts surround the pipeline of moving those employees, like we spoke about, from those direct care positions into leadership and into senior leadership. And I think that pipeline does not exist. I think going back to sweeping under the rug, we found all kind of fancy ways to justify that. We talk about lattice promotions and all kinds of ways to justify the fact that as an industry, we have not done a good job of preparing these direct care workers, most of whom are minorities, for leadership positions. So our little way as an organization, we've started a leadership training program. We just have our first 4 employees who started this program, and we're working with them academically and practically, as shadowing and mentoring and stuff like that. But there's also that academic piece to it, because we want to prepare them. It may not be with AG Roads, but we want to prepare them for leadership, not just promote individuals into positions for the sake of showing diversity. But you have not done them any justice by doing that. And I think that's actually the opposite of what equity and inclusion should be.
Yeah, and I love that about you, Deke, and your organization, because AG Roads is just on the forefront of all kinds of advances for the good of staff, which we appreciate. And I know this because we work with you, so I have an inside knowledge about that. One of the things that I'd say is a success story, if I can kind of jump ahead, because I was thinking when you mentioned the Leadership Academy, academy that you have, Walter Coffey, this is a little bit self-serving, who is my partner in life as well as partner in the business. He was very innovative and forward-thinking 14 years ago when he created the Leadership Academy for the Leading Age Georgia. And nobody else was doing it at that time. It was a year before the National even did it. But I remember Walter talking about how he was burdened by looking around and seeing in the leadership level that they looked like him. And he described himself as an old, bald white man. And that's what he was seeing. And he said, it's great that they got awards, they got accolades because they've done the work. So they deserve that. But what about people who don't get the opportunity to be those senior managers and leaders? What about them? And so that's where he came up with the idea of the Leadership Academy. And he was very intentional, and that he called senior managers, not necessarily leaders, but senior managers in Georgia, and said, look, this is what we're doing. This is why we're doing it. What I need for you to do is to look deep in your organization and come up with a diverse group of emerging leaders in your organization. It's so easy because we're comfortable when people look like us, but try looking at people who don't look like you, or someone you might not have considered before. So he was very intentional. That's what he wanted to see. And I'll tell you, over these 14 years, it's been going on long enough that we could see that it has made a difference in many organizations to see minority women moving through the ranks. And what's so great about going through the Leadership Academy is that they're not tokens when they reach that. They're being intentionally developed to take on a leadership role. And, at the end of the year, all of the participants come together to be recognized at the annual business meeting. And it just warms one's heart to look up there and see this diverse array of people. And so my hat's off to Walter, because that's an example of what it's going to take. And it's not overnight. I mean, this is 14 years in the making. But you got to do something. You got to start somewhere and be consistent and intentional in what your goal is.
David, let me add to that, and I'll say with regards to the Walter's Leadership Academy, the other good thing about it is there's an unselfishness to this work. So I have met many individuals. I met one recently who was sent to that academy by an employer, but let's just be real, the employer may not have had a position available for them, or they may have gotten an opportunity outside the organization, and they left the organization, have worked with other organizations, but yet they have moved into leadership. And they're grateful, one for the academy, two for the previous employer who allowed them. So there's kind of an unselfishness to this work as well, in understanding that, we may not create all leaders for our organization, but we're definitely, I guess, adding to that general leadership cadre of the state of Georgia.
Absolutely. Yeah. And part of that too is the idea that we want to attract and retain staff. We don't want people to leave our organization. And so we do, and through the academy, we're able to do that. And then adding in the coaching piece, again, a little bit self-serving, it has made a difference. It's been the secret sauce to, I think, staff really being all they could truly be, and developing in a way that they can retain this information and grow and stay in the organization and not leave our field, because we need them desperately.
And you have a comment here from Jackie Burnham Hart. If we could pop that. Thank you, Kathy, for popping that up. I can attest to the wonderful inclusion of the leadership program. So there you go. So yes, hats off to Walter and everyone who supported him in breaking that ground. Really important. I love hearing about it. Great. I also see that Evie Kugelman has a question. She would like us to elaborate on inclusion and to offer some additional examples. Is there anything else that you would add, maybe from your own experience? It might even be helpful to see what isn't an example of inclusion. What bubbles up for either of you?
When I hear that word inclusion, immediately I think that all staff, all parties should be at the table. And that's part of the inclusion, including them in the conversation. It's like the disability community that says nothing about us without us. That's an example, I think, of inclusion for me.
So exactly that. So inclusion, I think the ultimate way that we promote inclusion is by bringing all parties, all staff to the table in decision making. So decision making should not be a top-down exercise. It should be an exercise that includes staff. Now, I'm a leader. I'll be completely honest to tell you, I cannot or will not, consult with every single member of staff before I make a decision. Then I'm not going to be able to make decisions. but you need to make sure as broad a cross section of staff are being included in that decision making. On my level, on the C-suite level, I'll tell you the best example. We all talk about strategic plans. Every organization has a strategic plan. Well, if your strategic plan does not include a voice or opportunity for CNAs, housekeepers, LPNs, like I said earlier, then it really is myopic, and it's not a kind of inclusion. So not just having them sit at the table, but having them really be involved in the decision-making process.
Yeah.
Eden Alternative is a perfect example of that. That's what we preach at the Eden Alternative. And I think if we want to relate that back to our domains of well-being as well, that's what promotes that connectivity, that security, that identity, that purpose, by individuals feeling like they have a say or in the decision-making process.
Yeah.
I love too that Kim McRae has shouted out here to you, David, that the person-centered, person-directed care approach is used as an umbrella in these leadership academies. True or false? I'm guessing that's it. Emphatic yes.
Yeah, that's absolutely a guess. So much of what we do is influenced through our work with the Eden Alternative. It's hard to be an Eden educator and not incorporate these things, because I certainly, as I thought about this topic, I kept thinking about the ways in which even the Eden associate training can be applied to helping alleviate some of the inequities that we see. Starting with personal transformation. So much of Eden is talking about you start with yourself first. And that's what it's going to take for senior managers to really think about for themselves. How do they really feel about different people? In the training, we talk about ableism and ageism. And in that, there's an exercise where you ask yourself the question, how do you feel about older people?
Yeah.
How do you really feel about it? And when you discover in yourself that maybe you have some bias or even some unconscious bias toward them, then you have to begin, once you become aware of that, begin to rectify that and make some changes. And it may be changes in this case, with staff or with residents, really, with your operations. Yeah. All of that has to begin to change once you have that personal aha and transformation. Yeah. So that's why I love so much the Eden. The more I see things, I see how Eden the principles can be applied to this subject matter.
Totally, absolutely. And what I love about being really transparent about connecting the dots with person-directed care is that, I love that you're saying that the way we teach and the way we support implementation of person-directed practices sort of naturally aligns people to begin having these conversations. I think it's also important to point out, and I would love to see if you agree with me, that we can be doing all the right things, and still not addressing unconscious bias, which really it's a call to action, right? To really take seriously our commitment to person-directedness. Because until we have those conversations, we really aren't going the distance, right? So I love that it holds our feet to the fire and it gives us a chance to succeed, right?
Yeah.
So love that. Thank you. Walter Coffey shares here, and speaking of, right, Real Care Partnership really calls on us to be intentional regarding equity for all. So thank you. Love that. Absolutely. And we have a question from our former CEO, Jill Vitale. Awesome. The question is, what advice do you have for organizations getting started on a DEI journey?
Yeah. You touched on one of them a little while ago, at least Walter just touched on it, intention, being intentional in what we do. I think that is a huge one. I think we also touched on another one. I think DEI work surrounds having difficult conversations, because so much of it, like you said, is based on unconscious bias. It's based on microaggression, and it's based on blinders, right, that we all put up. We all have these biases in blinders that we put up. So having those difficult conversations. But I think even more importantly, and this kind of relates to the Eden and the person-centered or person-directed care journey. I think it's also takes a level of patience and understanding that this is culture change work that we're talking about, right? Yeah. So if you have a DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion issue in your organization, You have a cultural issue in your organization. I speak all the time when we talk about police departments and the problem. Those are cultural issues that these police departments have. And as we know in the culture change movement, it takes time. But as long as you're deliberate in that understanding and not using time as an excuse not to take action, I think you'll be on the right track and hang in there with it, and you'll get there.
Yeah. And I'd add, it's really about asking the right questions. Again,
Mm-hmm.
paralleling with the Eden principles, we ask ourselves, well, I would ask an employee, do you feel autonomous where you work? I mean, ask them direct questions. Do you feel a sense of security? You can use the domains and ask the direct question.
Yeah.
And then this is the important part, is to listen, to really deeply listen to what the individual is saying.
Yeah.
Yes, make that learning a two-way street. So powerful.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Love that. So you started to touch on this a little bit when you answered Jill's question, but just want to see if there's anything we're missing. Want to make sure we mine it all. For organizations that want to begin addressing social inequity head-on, what strengths do they need to develop so that they can build on those strengths over time and really entrench that change so that it's lasting? Are there any other strengths?
Yeah, I think empowerment has to be a piece of this. I mean, staff need to be empowered to know, that they can do their work, they can be trusted, they can be depended on. It's building that relationship, that deep relationship, and trust is built around that. When you empower staff and they know, those sitting around the table know they can speak freely.
Yeah. And I'll add another one as well, similar to the Eden approach. I think this work is so difficult work that it needs complete support from the top, from the apex of the organization.
Yeah.
So a lot of us are out there peddling DEI work, again, because of recent happenings. But if we don't have the support of our boards and our leadership, really we're just kind of playing in the sandbox. And this is a dangerous sandbox to play in if you do not have the support from those higher ups. So I think winning over our boards is a very, very important part of this.
Yeah, absolutely agree with that, Dee.
And speaking of strengths, Jill is just reinforcing what you just shared, that she loves the idea of using the domains of well-being as a framework for these conversations. And she says, thank you. So that would be definitely a strength that you could build, is to go back to those foundational concepts and keep letting them build the strengths that you want to continue to build on. So, nice. Thank you. Very nice. So, okay. Now, we know that different isms like racism, ageism, ableism, sexism, homophobia, etc., that these things, they don't exist in a vacuum. And talking about how these different isms collide and impact each other is a really important part of understanding the effects of social inequity. So obviously, this is what we mean when we are talking about intersectionality. And so how might we help teams see that understanding intersectionality is really crucial? If you're committed to individualizing care, if you're committed to person-centeredness and person-directedness, any examples that you would share?
Yeah. Well, go ahead, Dick.
No, David, you shared a great one. So David's example of the Ghanaian individual that he's mentoring is a great example, because that is a perfect example of intersectionality. One not with race, but obviously because of her national origin. If we have not seen yet, we should know that 20% of our labor force are immigrants. So there are those pieces of intersectionality that we touched to. But the way I think we also get that over is to just accentuate the health inequities that are produced when we have that intersectionality. COVID unearthed that with residents with residents who were Black and residents who had dementia. So residents who were Black, of course, were more prone to getting dementia, to getting COVID, and then residents who have dementia, of course, are more prone to contracting COVID as well. So let's sit up a minute, let's be empathetic, and let's think about your Black residents who suffer from dementia. And they were just so doubly at risk because of those health inequities that's created. So I think a good way through empathy is for ensuring that our care partners understand and see that double impact, which can happen because of intersectionality.
Yeah. And I think once that happens, once you've done all those things, then it's important then to look for shared values. One of the things that Denise Hyde put in the growth model that we were looking at, that I was looking at, it's about looking to see what values each one of them has. What are your values? And then choosing among those values, what do we have in common? So for instance, if it's respect, if that's one of the common values that as a team you say you have, then when somebody's not respecting somebody, then it must be called out. But then also, and this is the coach in me saying, I would ask the question, what would it look like if we were respecting each other? What would that feel like if we were respecting each other? What would that do for our organization if we were respecting each other? And let people talk about what that means to them, and you get a better understanding, because respect is not the same to everybody. Again, we were talking about different cultures, different folks, diverse groups of folks. Everybody defines it differently. And so it's a way to start moving forward once you've identified the things that Deke just mentioned.
I love it. Absolutely. And Kim McCrae is letting us know that the Culture Change Network of Georgia is offering a series of short videos about diversity and inclusion and focusing specifically on intersectionality. She's offered a link there in the comment box if you're curious and you want to check them out. It also gives me just an opportunity to let people know that while it's not ready yet, coming in September is a free video course on Evolve Online Learning by the Eden Alternative, focused on intersectionality, featuring some facilitators from the old school system that is developed in part by Ashton Applewhite. That would be Kiernan Carpenter and Ryan Becker.
Hey, Laura, I'm reminded too for a second of some advice I was given by someone who works in the DEI space. And her advice was, intersectionality is a reality. It's a reality we have to tackle. But she said, do not let intersectionality take your focus off of, if you have a specific issue that you have identified regarding gender, regarding sexual orientation and the treatment of those individuals in our organization, regarding race. She said intersectionality is sometimes used as an easy way to deflect from you being laser focused on that. And her advice was that most times when, to David's point, when you focus on just respect for individuals and you focus on that one issue, you're able then for people to get multiple, other intersectional issues that relate to it. The civil rights movement was a perfect example of that, right? So in dealing with race, we also recognize other aspects of bias in our society that we also had to do with. So just a cue not to use intersectionality as an excuse for us to deflect for what may be an overt issue that we have.
Oh, so good.
Well
Such
said.
a great reminder, right? That awareness is really important, and you don't want to take the attention away from something that might be immediate right in front of you and needs your immediate attention. So, were you going to say something, David? I'm sorry.
No, I'm good.
Okay, beautiful. All right, love this conversation. So rich. Now, one of the things that we like to do here, right, is tell stories. I mean, such a powerful way to learn from each other. And I'm wondering if you have any specific success stories you've picked up along the way, perhaps within your own organization or your own company, where teams have addressed the impact of social inequities in highly effective ways. And if so, how have these examples strengthened specific domains of well-being? I know some things have been touched on already, but just wondering if there's anything else out there, or if we want to revisit one of the stories that you've shared.
Well, I would say the one I shared about the Leadership Academy was like the most glaring one that I know of, that I've actually experienced.
Yeah. So one that just came to me. So we started a DEI committee like most organizations did, just about a year ago, and we were intentional in having CNAs, direct care staff involved in that committee as well. And while again primarily focused on race, one huge aspect that came up by committee from actually a CNA in the group was that we do such a good job. Our activities departments do such a good job um, celebrating certain times of the year. But she made the point we did not celebrate or even acknowledge Pride Month as an organization, Pacific Islander Month as an organization, and happy to say we through social media, this is the first year, the last few months, we started celebrating a lot of those months as times as well. So it goes to the point too of why we need inclusion and encouraging the voices and empowering the voices of individuals in these groups. But I think that's a real good example of how a team or team approach was able to help us address inequities within our own organization.
Beautiful. I love that. Um, this could be about stories. Something that has come up in conversation with people, for me at least, along the way, and this is specific to racial inequity, I think, where there are white people who really want to be allies, who want to be advocates and activists in some cases for, breaking down all of the bias, but feel afraid, but feel afraid to step out. I'm going to say something wrong. I'm going to do something wrong. I'm going to offend somebody. I'm learning. I'm still a baby in this. These are the things that I've heard in conversation. And so, do you have anything to offer those individuals who want to make a difference but feel timid, don't really know where to begin?
We've heard this one a lot.
I'll dive in. Yeah, I'll dive in. This is tough work.
Yeah.
And these are difficult conversations. But this is also very ethical and very moral work. So I don't take the timidness and the being afraid as an excuse.
Yeah.
I think it is work you have to tackle head on. I will shout out someone in particular that I know this audience probably will know. I will certainly shout out Mr. Jack York. Last summer, again, in the midst of a lot of this, Jack gave me a call. And I was like, Jack, why are you calling me? I thought Francis was maybe coming to town or something. Because that's what from Jack. But no, he wanted to talk to a leader in the industry about a lot of this racial business, a lot of this difficult conversation. And he chose me. And we had an hour-long, very, very difficult conversation. But I think that's the only way to do it. I don't think it's something you could tiptoe around. This is a moral issue. This is an issue that is like I said, 50% or more of our workforce. In my case, 90% of my workforce are afflicted by this issue. So it is not something we can be afraid of. It is something we have to be sensitive about and understand that conversation is probably going to be about you listening more than anything else. But don't be afraid to ask the question. Don't be afraid to have the conversation.
Yeah, I would think if you're feeling timid and uncomfortable about having that kind of conversation, first of all, lean into the discomfort of it all, because as Dika said, it's a difficult thing. It's a difficult process. But I would say, in order to take away the fear, put it out on the table. Say, I don't know what I'm saying. I'm not sure if I'm going to offend you.
Yeah.
Lay it out there to begin with. And hopefully the person to whom you're speaking will understand that and be open and receptive to having that conversation with you. But I think that taking the fear away, just put it out there, and there's nothing to fear after that, because it's been said, it's been established.
It's so
but
true.
But you got to have the conveation. You got to have the conversation.
Yeah, I like that you're saying this is a moral imperative. You don't get to opt out.
Yeah.
Just because you're worried about being perfect or looking good. And I hear you that being vulnerable breaks down the barriers, right?
It does. Absolutely.
If we just share that we don't know what we don't know, and that maybe something really powerful can come of that conversation.
Absolutely.
So great. So I hear you saying that the first step to being an ally is jump in.
Yeah. Do it. Just do it.
Yep.
Yeah. Fantastic. So I'm wondering if there's anything we haven't touched in our conversation so far today that you would like to make sure is on the table or explored. Maybe before, I'm going to give you a moment to chew on that. I just want to respect what's coming through the box here. Walter Coffey shares that senior management must create environments where people are comfortable to talk and share, listen and respond versus simply a token conversation. Thank you again, Walter. That's wise words indeed.
Yeah. And Walter's right too, because I mean, if your employee feels uncomfortable coming to you about, hey, not being able to pay for groceries, or about another issue they're having, or about something they're having in the building, what makes you feel this is going to be a conversation they're coming? So you gotta create that environment, where that open door environment, as a leader, as a manager, that staff feel comfortable even having these conversations. So thank you, Walter.
Again, it goes back to the senior manager and the leadership. I mean, it makes all the difference in the world, and that's why I say that's where the personal transformation needs to take place.
Yeah, absolutely love it. Anything we haven't touched on? Anything that is really crucial to helping organizations know, what do I do now? I want to step up. I want to take responsibility. I want to be fully and truly person-directed.
Yeah, it wouldn't hurt to bring in outside support.
It's true.
Because sometimes it's the outside person who's seen as the expert, as opposed to the people within the organization.
Yes, build that bridge.
Absolutely.
I hear that. So Walter says, yes, personal transformation first. And as always, right, it always comes down to that. I love that we can trust those foundational concepts. We can always come back to them when we're not quite sure, right?
And so we spoke about the moral issue, the moral obligation, but we have a huge business obligation here, business case in caring for our elders. Every leader I have spoken to in the last 6 months would tell you their number one issue right now is our workforce, is staff. We cannot find staff. So I think we have an imperative there. If our industries are going to survive, if our sector is going to survive, and if our residents are going to have anyone to take care of them, I think we have a real obligation to attack this head on for that reason.
Absolutely. If we don't create workplaces that attract the right people, and the right people meaning people who are committed to the care of elders with heart and soul and passion.
But we need isn't it? I was going to say, isn't it great though, as we're sitting here talking about this, Eden has principles already in place that can address all of these things, that are proven to work, not only in transforming organizations to be more person-centered toward our elders, but to each other.
Thank you, David. Okay. Unless we have anything else that we want to tackle today, I feel like this has been an incredibly rich conversation. I'm getting a thumbs up from someone. Looks like we're hitting the right spots, and I'm glad to hear it. I'd like to thank both of you. I'd like to thank both of you for being here, for being open to exploring this topic, for offering guidance for those of us who are seeking it, who want to take the right steps, who want to make the commitment. Thank you for being for the teamwork.
Well, this certainly is a pleasure for me to be with two people I respect so highly, and to have this kind of conversation is just great. So thank you both.
I would say likewise. Tons of respect for you both, David. We go way back here in Georgia. So thank you for your leadership. Thank you for your mentorship. Laura, what you guys are doing at the Eden Alternative. I say that not only because I'm a board member at the Eden Alternative, but I think I'm a practitioner who runs an organization that tries to live by the Eden Alternative principles. And I can absolutely say the difference that is made, not just in the lives of our elders, but let's not just forget our staff. It's made a huge difference in the lives of our staff.
Just so appreciate hearing it. It's not taken lightly. And I know that I can speak on behalf of the whole organization and the broader Eden Alternative family, if you will, and say thank you both for being the leaders that you are, for modeling what it means to live the principles, to protect those domains of well-being, and to look after how they show up in people's lives, namely the people that work for you, work with you, and the people that you serve. So yeah, let's inspire lots of people to be on this journey. And thank you for being a part of that. Guess what? We have a question.
Oh boy.
I was going to say bye, but it looks like a good one. So I think I better say something here. We've got a little time if you're okay. Yes, Trisha Jean. Deke, you talked about if your leadership is not all the way in, it is a dangerous sandbox to play in. Can you elaborate? And then we really will let you go.
Oh yeah. Rich, I love that question. You know, this is serious work that impacts people's lives. I would say if it is not, we need to be very careful that if we're not getting into this for the right purposes, to help to improve people's lives, in particular, going to the topic of this discussion, you know, how this inequity in fact impacts our workforce. If we're going into this just to say that we have an equity and inclusion committee, if we're going into it just to say that we're diverse and we now have 3 Black people on our board and 2 Asian Americans on our board, and 2 in our leadership, then I think this could backfire on you really easy, because if this is not genuine, if this is not heartfelt, if this is not truly done for those reasons, just like our residents know when we don't do things, genuinely for the right reasons, it'll backfire on you. So that's my point. It's not to get anyone scared about the sandbox, but just to prompt organizations to understand that this is change work. Change work is difficult work. It's work that people would cry about. It's work that affects people's lives and their children's lives and their children's children's lives. So for God's sake, if we're doing this, let's be doing it genuinely and for the right reasons.
Yeah, amen.
Beautiful. Thank you. On that note, gentlemen, have a great afternoon. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks you. Again.
Appreciate you. Thanks for all the rest of you for your great questions and comments. And next week, we have Chris Field, who's going to be talking to us about being a disruptor. Don't miss it. Wednesday, July 28th.